the shooting range. In this episode, what happened in Italian Bari harbor and why it is important to learn from your mistakes. Tanks with drum autoloaders for dummies. Line. The developers answer questions that you've left in the comments. But first, let's start with the Griffon family, the finest birds of prey. What plane can excel at everything? Why, the renowned gentleman from foggy Albion, of course, the Spitfire. Today, we'll take apart its later iterations, the so-called Griffons. There are 5 of them in the game. The first 4 are accessible to everyone via research, but the last one is a premium aircraft. These machines received such a majestic name thanks to their engines. Since the 14th model, the Spitfires came with brand new Rolls-Royce Griffon engines installed. And that fine piece of engineering took the aircraft to completely new heights. While flying a Griffon, you can engage even on 10-kilometer altitudes. Ridiculous! Enough to reach some pesky astronauts, we wager. The Spitfire Mark 14 and 18 are equipped with 2 Hispano Mark II cannons and 2 M2 Browning machine guns. More DACA? Certainly. However, next modifications of Griffon, Mark 22 and Mark 24, changed so drastically that there was almost nothing left from the good old Spitfire. Here, take a whiff of this changelog. An elongated fuselage with lowered fairing, a drop-shaped canopy, 2 additional internal fuel tanks in the stern, a new vertical plumage with increased surface area, completely redesigned reinforced wings and restructured radiators. Also, even more DACA. 4 Hispano Mark V cannons on board. Alas, this was pretty much the peak of the Spitfire's evolutionary capabilities. After going out with a thunderous bang, it passed the torch to the next generation of combat aircraft. When you decide to take any Griffon for a spin, you don't just get a good aircraft. You get an all-rounder which can challenge any enemy at any altitude. If you manage to fully master it, you'll forget the definition of the word defeat. And this adrenaline ride will last for quite some time, because the Griffon modifications are evenly spread between different battle ratings, from 5.7 to 6.7 in realistic battles, and from 5.0 to 6.0 in arcade. There's a catch, of course. You'll perform great at lower ends of both spectrums, but if you dare to snoop a bit higher, you will, let's say, encounter some difficulties. Skies up there belong to the younger birds of prey. Different types of engines, completely different planes in general. Against them, you can only maneuver and pray. On the other hand, if you're playing smart and making use of your enemy's mistakes, you can even take on jets and still emerge victorious. How do you play on this magnificent beast? Well, your engine is tremendously powerful, and that allows for a climb angle of 20 to 25 degrees. Use this opportunity to rule the battlefield with a steel fist. Control the combat situation, don't just react to it. Set your convergence at 500 meters, take air targets or stealth belts. You can challenge even 5 enemies simultaneously if you're feeling particularly spicy. In the end, it will all come down to your skill. You are dangerous, but still, you'll need to get used to your armaments. You can't fire in volleys. On top of that, the most effective belts come without tracers, so you'd better prepare to wrangle the ballistics until you can hit most of your shots. On the plus side, you can take down an opponent in both head-on attacks and from maneuvers. The Griffons can pull through anything. But in case you're fighting in mixed battles, the Griffon proves to be a good team player. Each modification has access to wide payload options. Of course, in reality, these late modifications didn't see any action. They got into serial production only in 1946. But in War Thunder, you can feel the rumbling of the Griffon's engine. You can push it to its absolute limit till the last drop of fuel and the last bullet is spent. Now, let's go to Bari Harbor and talk about why it's important to learn from mistakes. If not the enemy's, then at least your own. By the end of 1943, the US Navy was chasing the Japanese fleet all around the Pacific. Cities and factories of the Reich were engulfed in all-consuming flames like giant campfires. Sicily broke down from just a gentle press, surrendering the entire southern Apennine Peninsula to the Allies. Mussolini fled to the north and hastily began to organize the Italian Social Republic, protected by remnants of the German forces. But even there, they were living on borrowed time. Harbors of southern Italy received thousands of soldiers and countless military shipments daily. Allies had complete control over the Mediterranean Sea. No one was afraid of sudden attacks from the air. Generals knew perfectly well that most of the German aircraft ventured far to the east, only never to return from their pilgrimage. Soviet pilots already made short work of Goering's aces and took initiative in Cuban airspace. The Soviet Air Force was ready to mow Germans down by the thousands. What's there to be afraid of? Nothing. Literally nothing. That's why, upon arrival in Italy, the American soldiers were quickly getting used to the local carefree life, full of comfy sunlight, sea, exquisite Italian wine, and beautiful women that were always cheerful to their GI liberators. And of course, they didn't pass on any opportunity to poke fun at grim and growly Englishmen who refused to leave their AA weapon stations even in the harshest heat. Well, that's the German Messerschmitt 210 right above us, so what? It's like a crazy local hobo, a part of the scenery. He's always buzzing around, no need to get all fussy. In the meantime, Wolfram von Richthofen, commander of the significantly thinned Luftflotte II, was experiencing strongly mixed emotions. Something between rage and bewilderment, to be precise. Just imagine it. That local hobo Messerschmitt pilot reported Italian harbors jam-packed with American ships, brightly lit evening streets, and total hibernation of all AA weapons. Sorry, could you repeat that? Are they taunting? Or perhaps baiting us? Or are they really that daft? Should we attack them or let them be? Herr Richthofen couldn't set his mind on the decision until Albert Kesselring, the Luftwaffe commander of the Mediterranean Sea, gave him some laconic but firm advice. Don't hesitate. Bomb them to Kingdom Come with everything you have. On the evening of December the 2nd, 1943, the whole Luftflotte II could muster only 105 Junkers 88 bombers, the scraps of a once mighty air force. Until the very last moment, Richthofen was afraid of potential ambush, but when the scout aircraft spread tin foil in the skies to scramble American radar, Bari was silent. No commotion, no attention, no nothing. They didn't even sound the alarm. After that, Richthofen knew for sure he was dealing with a bunch of overconfident fools. A couple of minutes later, the twin-engine Junkers dropped a total of 200 tons of bombs on their brightly lit harbor, sinking 28 Allied ships and killing over 1,000 American soldiers, and the same amount of civilians. Germans lost only one plane to some lone British AA gun. Thick, corrosive smoke made day indistinguishable from night, and fires did the opposite. It was the second Pearl Harbor, and its heart-wrenching horror was in fact that one of the sunken ships turned out to be an American transport with a chemical weapon on board. Bombs with mustard gas were brought here in secret from Europe, out of fear that Hitler would use chemical warfare first. In that case, the Allies would need to answer such a blow immediately. And, well, what can we say? Sadly, the mustard gas found its victims. It covered flaming water with a poisonous film, scorching the lungs of the half-dead, drowning American soldiers. Of course, the Allies immediately blamed the Germans for yet another war crime, but the attackers themselves didn't expect their actions to result in such devastation. It took a week to put out the fires in Bari. The rapid advancement of the Allied forces ground to a halt. The soldiers were barely eating. There were no bombs nor fuel for the flying fortresses and liberators. The only way to get all of that was to wait for overseas shipments once again. One successful raid didn't get the Germans a meaningful advantage, but nevertheless, it was an important wake-up call for the Allies. Overconfidence and perceived victory can cost you dearly, especially at war. Now, let's talk about what's so special about tanks with drum autoloaders and how to use them correctly. Engineers from all around the globe spent years trying to increase the fire rate of main cannons on tanks. As a result, autoloaders found their way onto many machines. Specifically, the French were among the first to hone this technology almost to perfection. How, you ask? Simple. They developed tanks with drum autoloaders. In this type of autoloader, the shells are placed in a contraption faintly reminiscent of the cylinders used in revolvers. Shells are going straight to the breech without any help from the loader, which drastically increases the rate of fire. There are many tanks with drum autoloaders in the French research tree, heavily armored machines, nimble, light vehicles, sometimes even hybrids between the two. We're looking at you, Lorraine 40T. And of course, don't forget about the hot American macho. The new T-54E1 also utilizes a drum autoloader. Keep in mind that the sole presence of this tech doesn't define your playstyle by itself. For example, the AMX M4 also has some armor, enough for its battle rating. True, rate of fire is lacking, but it's not too far behind the AMX's peers. Or perhaps you would prefer the style that we like to call the quick and the dead. Look at these itty-bitty death machines like the AMX-13. How could it compete with Goliaths like the Tiger II, right? Wrong. They're doing just fine. Reloading speed of 5 seconds and a 12-shell drum is a match that can terrify even the biggest elephant in the room. There are also ATGMs. In other words, don't step on the snake. It'll bite ya. Bulkier machines like the AMX-50, the Char 25T, and the Lorraine 40T possess astounding mobility. These tanks allow you to capture the most unexpected firing positions. You can drive them uphill, straight into some mountains, or be the first to reach the point while your enemies are still trying to leave the base. Couple that with a fantastic reloading speed of 4 seconds, with the exception of the Char 25T, and you'll get an absurdly dangerous tank that can fire its main caliber like it's some kind of machine gun. Even one mistake on your enemy's part, and he's done. However, don't get too cocky yet. There's a couple of nuances. Firstly, with that kind of fire rate, you can waste all 7 of your shells in the blink of an eye. Secondly, this glorious firepower comes at a price of your defense. You barely have any. The arch nemesis of these tanks is not some HE shell. Even a puny AA gun can cause you a debilitating headache. If you're a person with an acquired taste for big calibers, don't worry, we gotcha. The AMX-50 Surbese can sate your hunger. Its 120mm cannon reloads in some 6 seconds, and the drum can take 19 shells. That's just impressive, really. We'll talk about this machine in greater detail in one of the next episodes. Tanks with drum autoloaders provide truly unique gameplay experience. You can shoot down the entire opposing team in seconds, like some gunslinger from the Wild West. And just like said gunslinger, you aren't exactly bulletproof. There's just no room for mistakes when you're gambling like that. In battles, choose your targets carefully and utilize your advantage in reloading speed. But don't forget about the shell capacity. Some of these tanks are sufficiently armored, but even in that case you'd be better off playing as the flanker who hits enemies in the side. Excellent mobility helps with that. Besides, if your drum suddenly runs dry, flanking allows you to safely retreat to the nearest captured point and replenish the ammo. Your loader, of course, will gradually refill the first-order ammo rack, but it'll take some time. Remember, tanks like this do not tolerate any mistakes. But if you're playing your cards right, you will be rewarded tenfold. Get ready for the traditional last part of our show, Hotline. Developers answering questions from the comments. The first question, or rather a group of questions, comes from a user called Zakbak. Number 1. Bomber cockpits. Are there any news on them? Number 2. Alternative maps like the American desert map. Is not based on a historical battle, just based on a location. If you plan on making maps like these to spice up gameplay, could I recommend a Welsh map? Set in the mountains of Snowdonia? An Operation Sea Lion-based map, possibly? And number 3, are you going to implement tank customization? The possibility of removing tank side skirts, adding light armor, like they did on Sherman tanks in Iwo Jima and Okinawa, sandbags, etc.? Hi. About non-placeholder bomber cockpits, to put it simply, right now there are many other pressing issues that we need to address, and oh boy, do bomber cockpits require a lot of time and effort to make. About maps, it's a very neat suggestion. Thanks. About tank customization, right now we have a model in place where different armor options are somewhat realized through different variations of the same vehicle. A fully fledged customization would force us to remake a lot of things from the ground up. So the answer is probably not. Monkey Jack writes, I look forward to the shooting range every week, so what's happening with the World War mode? What is this mysterious mode under the Battles tab? Thanks for your kind words, mate, we appreciate it. As for World War, we're working really hard on that front. For those who don't know, it's a special mode involving squadrons' battles on a living, breathing, ever-changing global map. It's one of our most ambitious ideas, so it will take some time to do it justice. And the last message is from Alex Blakely. Bruce, my man, would it be possible to add a premium British Hurricane 2B called Grant's Hurricane 2B with the spliced propeller? Love the story. Hi Alex, glad to hear that. It's a neat idea, and I personally would like that very much. But War Thunder devs like to make their premiums as special as possible. These are usually unique in more ways than just one, and looks are just a part of the charm, so unlikely, mate. Thanks a bunch, though, for the suggestion. Anyway, I'd be really glad to see such camouflage from you guys at live.warthunder.com. Well, that's it for today, but feel free to write your questions in the comments below. We do read them all, and you might see some of them answered in the next episode. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you on the shooting range.